Kevin Seifert is back with us. Lots of good texts have come in. Question for Seifert. This is from Ryan in Minnetonka. It's a good question. He asks, what's the biggest gap you see between the Vikings and other good to very good teams in the league? To me, he writes, it is not having a game changer at the DT, defensive tackle position. I was surprised they did not make a move when their record was 5-0, and I have to believe the team knew this was a position they need help in, or a major improvement in, or at the very least, they need depth there. Do you agree with him?
There's definitely not like a classic three technique Kevin Williams type, John Randall type, mentioning one Hall of Famer, one potential Hall of Famer, interior disruptors. I mean, I think Harrison Phillips has actually gotten better at that over the course of the time he's been here, but I think it was reported and well known that the Vikings at least had targeted in theory Christian Wilkins, who was the top free agent player at that position in the offseason, and that there's lots of ways to scheme pressure. They've been getting a lot of interior pressure from Ivan Pace Jr., the linebacker, who unfortunately went on injury reserve today. But in terms of if you just were to look at their roster and say, where are the places you would think that they would be targeting in the offseason, that's one. Cornerback is probably the other.
What do we need to say about the release? What's the moral of the story regarding the release of a Caleb Evans?
He was the size that everyone wants in a cornerback. He's 6'1"-ish. They tried their best to get him on the field. His rookie year, he had 3 concussions. He came back, and Brian Flores made him a starter last year, and he had 15 games to prove himself, and they eventually benched him. And once you get benched in that situation, I think it's hard to come out of it. And so maybe a fresh start will help him. Brian Flores, I think, is a little bit tougher on the players who need development or the players who aren't quite at the top end of what's on the roster. And in the past 2 years, he's especially this year, they're playing their top guys basically all the snaps, and there's not been much room to get young players, even Dallas Turner, their first round pick, a ton of snaps, and that's just the way they operate. And you can't argue with the performance of the defense this year. And so development of younger players has taken a secondary role, and that sort of adds another notch, an unfortunate negative notch to the 2022 draft that now has had half the players that were in it depart the organization. And Nick Muse, the 7th round tight end who was waived yesterday, if they don't put him back on the practice squad, then that will be 6. And so as for as much as we can say about how good their defense has been this year and how good it was at times last year, they have not been able to, with the exception of Pace, develop any of the young players and get them on the field.
Along those same lines, this is Matt from Owego, New York. Owego. Am I pronouncing that right? Owego?
I don't know.
Owego? Unless he left out an S. I thought there was an Oswego, but maybe I'm wrong. Do you think they could take a look at adding a vet interior DL like Hicks or Sue, or more depth at cornerback Howard for the stretch run? One area I think the Eagles and Lions would expose them is run defense, adding a big guy for the playoffs. So
it's interesting. The Vikings' run defense has been the best in the league. It's not like necessarily because they have 600 pounds of people in the middle. There's lots of different ways to do it, and to me, that has not been. Maybe the pass rush up the middle when it's 4, but what they try to do is they bring in Jihad Ward, who's sort of an outside linebacker. He's like a 280-pound outside linebacker, and they put him in the interior, and that's what they've been going with for most of the season. But I personally don't think that running up the middle, rush defense up the middle has been an Achilles heel for them. But the Eagles are obviously just a tremendous rushing offense right now, and I don't know how many teams in the league could stop them.
Are we done with Dallas Turner, by the way? Are we done on him?
No, I don't. I mean, am I, or is the team?
Both.
I'm not down on him. I think the same thing applies. I think it's very tough for young players to get on the field in
complicated defense.
And I just think that there's just the standard is pretty high in terms of what they will, the degree to which you have to be competent to get on the field at all. And so this is not these are not treated as preseason games, obviously, but there's also in the big picture opportunities to get some players some snaps on the field that I think that the Vikings under Brian Flores have been pretty stingy on. And I asked him about that today, especially as it relates to Evans. Like, what's the philosophy of and the balance of keeping your best players on the field? There's no doubt that the cornerbacks they're playing are better than the Caleb Evans, or better than and the edge rushers are Jonathan Grenard and Andrew Van Ginkel are both having career years. Like, which one do you want to take off the field to put Dallas Turner out there? There's no doubt that those guys are better, but
doesn't mean he has to be a bust.
Doesn't mean he's not a bust, and I don't think that there's anyone thinking that. I do think that if he was like this dominant, like couldn't be blocked edge rusher, that he would they would have probably found more opportunities to get him on the field than they have. But short of just being a guy who landed in the place where he was drafted and was ready to get 15 sacks in his rookie year, I don't think that there's much to be concerned about quite yet.
You've covered lots of adventures and misadventures in Chicago for the Minnesota Vikings, covering that club. Where did the finish on Sunday rank, and how gobsmacked were you that you literally were looking at an OT outcome and the possibility that the Vikings could actually lose the ball game?
Well, we have to file a little short story right at the end of the game, and I had basically written it. Vikings win, and I was willing to accept that they had gotten a little, they had the kickoff, long kickoff return. Okay, it scored. Okay, they had a backdoor cover on the 2-point conversion. Okay, it's going to be closer than the game.
It's always about gambling with you, isn't it?
Well, no, yes, always. Yeah. And so that part got lost in the shuffle of getting to overtime, but that a lot of money would have exchanged hands there, and did, because it still ended up being a 3-point win. And so regardless, I had my foot on my finger on the button, ready to send the story in to the office to publish it. And then all of a sudden the onside kick happened. And this has just been something that's more recent, is that the onside kick is so hard to recover that you just don't. In the old days, they were still hard, but the percentage was a little bit higher. And you just always thought there was a chance. You always thought, and this iteration of the onside kick has just been so unsuccessful that you don't think in the back of your mind that when it's a 2-score game and there's 22 seconds left that it really matters. And so I was not watching the onside kick, to be 100% honest, and I saw it on the replay, obviously, and was able to go ask questions about it. But it was beyond shocked. It was like I didn't even realize it happened.
I said yesterday, I think the Bears, I know no one does this, I think the Bears would have been better giving the ball to the Vikings at the start of the OT. I really do. I think there was so much assumption that, I want to get their offense back on the field because they're hot right now. And I'm thinking, no, I
think you're overthinking it.
I might be, but I tend to think that their defense might have actually been, it might have been an opportunity for their defense to stand tall. And the old deal of you get the ball second, you know what you have to do, right? Unless, now again, if the Vikings might have scored a touchdown, then the game's over. That's the rub. Which I get, but
yeah. Well, in retrospect, the way Sam Darnold was like, the way he played in overtime, I think it may be, but you don't make the decision in retrospect, obviously. So I get what you're saying, but that, to me, that was, and I know the craziness of that last 22 seconds was wild, but to me, the broad takeaway of the game was his overtime performance. He played well up to that, but
talked a lot about that yesterday.
Yeah, and so I don't want to go back over it again if you don't. But to me, that, I mean, that was it was I'm watching
6 for 6, 90 yards, and a nice scramble.
I'm watching Aaron Rodgers. I'm watching, Drew Brees. I'm watching what those guys used to do. Not just in one little overtime, but over the course of an entire season. But you couldn't have asked for anything more. And they had the sack, so it was 2nd and 17. They had a false start, so they had a 1st and 15, and they overcame that. Then they had a hold, and it was 1st and 20. So 3 of the first down series were coming from behind anyway. And so people say, well, the defense was tired and they couldn't keep up with, TJ Hawkins and all this stuff. But there was just a lot of great quarterbacking happening right there. And to me, it was the best moment he's had.
No question.
Here and maybe in his NFL career.
Yeah. And it was, how did he construct it? He constructed it occasionally going downfield some, but starting with the 2nd and 17, I think the first completion to Hawkinson was it for 8?
For 7.
7. And it's that old deal of you don't have to get it all on this play, and that's where you're going to end up on 3rd and 17. Take the 10, take the 7.
Yeah.
And then he also then got a little bit greedier and had some success with the longest one, whether it was a good one to JJ and a good one to Hockenson, right?
He did the dagger across the middle. Yeah. He just fired a ball to Justin, and Justin broke a tackle in his 20, and then Hockenson just found that area in the zone where and Darnold was right on target with him, and he talked afterwards like, it might sound simple, but like they were playing basically their third game together. And so Hockenson is always going to find that area. And then by game 3, Darnold knows that's where he's going to go. And he looked for him and it was right there and it was perfect. And so, it was just very, and like, he did make some really good throws, but he also just stayed calm. And like, if you're a believer in momentum, he just totally reversed that. Yeah. And so, it was just great.
We'll come back with one more segment with Seifert. I want to get into the JJ conundrum and a couple of other things before we talk hockey with Louie at the bottom of the hour. Kevin Seifert, what's the Cam Robinson update for this week?
The last we heard, their left tackle is still kind of dealing with a foot injury he had when he got here. O'Connell said yesterday that he feels pretty confident in his ability to work through it, but they'll have to see how the week goes.
Okay. And who else do we have to worry about injury-wise?
Well, Ivan Pace was the other one. So he had a hamstring at the very beginning of the game and went out, and they placed him on IR today, which I'm not sure if it's short-term or long-term, but at this point in the season, there's not much time to come back. So that's a pretty significant loss there because, as we talked about earlier, in terms of interior defensive play, like he's not the classic 250-pound run-stuffing inside linebacker, but what he really is good at is just being a disruptor inside. And if you don't have a defensive tackle who's a disruptor, the next best thing is a linebacker who gets behind them and blows up, blocking fullbacks and that sort of thing.
I'm going to try to talk a little bit about the JJ situation. And I hope this is taken in the right way because I agree with everybody else. He's a remarkable player. He's probably the best player on the team.
Just to be clear, we're Justin Jefferson, not J.J. McCarthy.
Yeah, that's the original J.J., Justin Jefferson.
Yeah.
But close circuit to all of you media jackals, we're acting like this is the first time in the history of football that a really accomplished wide receiver opens things up for other players. I mean, this is not unprecedented. It's true, but we're acting like, and then there's this other piece of it, like, oh, is he okay? JJ, is he okay?
Yeah.
We got to keep, because he's got big plans. He's got all these fancy numbers, and he wants to keep sustaining those numbers. And I'm going, are we all trying a little bit too hard here?
Yeah, I mean, not to say I'm the only one who's not doing that, but it has bothered me in the extent that, like, I am old enough to have been here when Randy Moss was here, and teams were creating entire defensive schemes to stop him.
Exactly.
The Tampa 2.
Yes.
Then I were both
drafting cornerbacks.
Yeah, their
Green
entire
Bay, right?
3 cornerbacks that were all over 6 feet. And then the weekly conversation around it was also pretty similar, that he was getting bracketed or triple teamed, or Scott Linehan, the offensive coordinator at the time, used to talk about how, like, it wasn't even worth watching. I mean, he's being somewhat sarcastic, but he's like, it's not even worth watching the film of our opponents and what they did this year, because we know when we get on the field, they're going to do something different than what they've ever done. And so, like, and I don't think the Vikings per se are like claiming this, but there is sort of a short-term feeling, amnesia and understanding that what he's facing is something that no other receiver has ever faced. And like, it could be a little bit more often, like a higher ratio of the total defensive plays that he's seeing that a Randy Moss did. Because remember, there was Chris Carter right next to him. Right. So you got 2 Hall of Fame receivers next to each other. But I don't think they're exotic schemes, but they're not, there's only so many different schemes. And so again, like, Justin Jefferson hasn't said, like, people are doing things that have never been done. He's just saying that things are happening to me that aren't happening to most other receivers in the league, and that's true. Some of it is that they're being physical with him, and like, there's been some games and some reps, and you can see it for yourself, where like, he has to be better getting off of people being physical with him. And you could say, well, why aren't they calling, defensive holding or illegal contact or defensive calls? The Vikings have had, I looked this up because Matthew Collar referenced this in Purple Insider. The Vikings have had 9 pass interference calls against their opponents on them, and 7 of them have been with Jefferson, and they rank second in the league with the total amount of yardage they've gained from pass interference.
Makes sense.
So that's a contribution he's making. So I think that sometimes some of us are like making looking at the, I don't mean media, but like just some people externally are looking at what's happened or what happened in this past game and projecting it into like an unprecedented situation, and it most definitely is not unprecedented. But it's and before the Chicago game, it was like you couldn't really trace into his production. He was still getting his 6 catches, 80, 90 yards, a couple 100-yard games. He was still on pace, and still is even now after this past game for a 100 or a 1,000, 1,400-yard season. And so, like, it's not like he's having this terrible year or that people have created this bubble around him that makes it impossible to get him the ball. It's just that he did have this one game, and 2 other guys had their best games of the season. And the things were connected. Well,
you mentioned it in, I think, your piece off of the game. Same look that they had in the Colts game that resulted in Darnold forcing the ball where Addison was open. He tried to force the ball to Jefferson. It was intercepted. Basically a similar look against the Bears, and he got the ball to the guy who was open.
Right, and remember, up until now, and it might even still be the case after the Bears game because it's just the one game, Justin Jefferson had a higher percentage of a team's targets than anybody else in the entire league. You know, not more targets total,
right?
But like of the team's total number of passes, he was his percentage was like 31% or 32%. Nobody else in the league was even over 30, and so he's gotten plenty of balls thrown his way. He's had tons of catches and tons of yards. And as Wes Phillips said today, the offensive coordinator. Really, when you see the nastiness come up historically in these situations is where a team is losing. And
exactly.
And Randy Moss used to say this like explicitly. He's like, I don't care, and I don't know if he meant it, but he would say it. He's like, I don't care if I'm not getting the ball as long as we're winning. If we lose and I'm not getting the ball, we got problems, is basically what he would say. And I would think that Justin maybe is of the same mind as well. And he has not said a single thing publicly, at least, to suggest that he's upset about it. It's been a topic, throughout the year in terms of the kinds of coverage he's getting, to the point where I think it's like, again, I think we've made it into an unprecedented situation, and it's certainly not.
Darnold okay physically?
Yeah, I think so. Like he had the ankle and he came out. And then Nick Mullins and what I think has been like underplayed, and you don't want to make too much of it, but it's kind of neat.
You could have made that throw. Jones was so open.
If I hadn't tripped over the guard, let's at least, Right. But like 2 times, he's been thrown into a game 2 times. How many times have we seen this in the history of football where the backup comes running in because somebody, he's cold.
His helmet's on backwards.
Yeah, his helmet's on backwards. He hasn't chin strap, and like they just hand off on 3rd and 1,000,000 and they get off the field. Both times he's come on has been on 3rd down. And both times he's Kevin O'Connell's called a pass. We're going YOLO on it, and he has called a pass, and both times he's thrown to Aaron Jones for 1st down. And so that in itself is like a really cool, like not easy to do thing, and it's now happened more than once, so it's like a pattern.
And in the Bears game, it was big. Yeah, they were going to have to give up the ball in that situation.
Against the Jets, it was in London, and so I think maybe they had a fumble after that. But in the moment, it was a great conversion.
November 26th, this date, 1998, Thanksgiving.
Yeah,
Dallas, Texas. Randy Moss, a rookie, makes 3 catches. Yeah. For 163 yards and 3 touchdowns.
That was about the time when teams realized they needed to do the unprecedented, exotic defenses that they eventually came up with.
Yeah, that was quite a. Now you weren't covering
that. That was the last Thanksgiving I ever had outside the state of Minnesota, I think, except for when I covered football outside of covered Vikings games when they played on Thanksgiving.
Okay.
I came here in 1999. That was 98. But I remember watching that game and like. Just, and I know up here, the Moss phenomenon was in full blast, but nationally, that was the game
catapulted it.
That really started it.
For sure.
Yeah.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Same to you
and yours.
Yeah.
Appreciate you coming in as always. Great stuff, and we'll chat next week.
For sure. Thank you.
Kevin Seifert, ESPN.com. What's your Twitter handle?
Yep, at Seifert ESPN.
And that's spelled S-E-I.
Yeah.
F-E-R-T.
We call it X now, but I think people,
Well,
if you type
enough.
Twitter in, it'll take you to X.
Very, very true, Davey. How about some hockey conversation? Lou Nanne is next.
Time now for the Vikings Report on The Fan, presented by Miller Lite. Viking safety Cam Bynum joins Barrero next after this from Miller Lite.
Well, she sneaks around the world from India to Carolina. She's a sticky-fingered filcher from Berlin down to Belize. She'll take you for a ride on a slow boat to China. Tell me where in the world is
Lou Nanne.
We expect Louie any minute now. That might be him calling as we speak. I see somebody calling on the other line there. Do you see that, Brett Blakemore? Don't forget, we're going to talk travel, Thanksgiving week travel with Thrifty Traveler guy Kyle Potter, who's joined us often over the years. Been a while, so we'll catch up with him at 5:30. If you have questions for Luigi, this is a very good time to hit the Bradshaw and Bryant KFAN text line, which is 64686. That's 64686. And it can be hockey, certainly on any level. Doesn't have to be, of course, just from the world of professional hockey, although I'm sure there will be some conversation early and often having to do with the loss to the Jets, Winnipeg Jets, yesterday. But we will perhaps explore some other items as well. Louis, of course, as always, is brought to you by our good friends at Kemp's. He joins us via the Connecticut Water Systems Hotline. Are you back in Florida or some other exotic location this week?
San Antonio. I've had some meetings here last couple of days.
San Antonio, Texas. So whenever you go to San Antonio, have you ever toured the Alamo?
Yes, I have. Not this time, but I have in the past.
You have done it in the past. How have you, fun, interesting, overrated, or what do you think of the old Alamo visit in San Antonio?
Well, you can't say it's overrated because it's such an important part of history, but it's amazing that it's much smaller than you would ever envision going into something like this. That's such a big battle, and when you get in there, you know that whatever it was, how many 200, 300, 400 people that are just going to die. There's no way they were going to survive that. It's not that I want to say it's overrated because it isn't, but it's so small compared to what you would have thought it would be for such a historic encounter.
I've told this story to Guardsy before. I want to say it was around 1960. It might have been 62. It was definitely early 60s. A motion picture was released called The Alamo. And
I saw it.
Do you remember it? It was John Wayne was in it. Richard Widmark was in it. Lawrence Harvey was in it. I convinced my parents. I fell in love with that movie so much as a kid that they took me to the theater. The theater now we're talking about, because this was in days where you're going to watch it on TV right away 5 times. And I blubbered. It was emotional. That movie, for whatever reason, struck me being a very emotional film. I don't know that there's another movie I've seen 5 times, but I saw The Alamo as a kid 5 times, Louis. I loved it.
It was something that, as you're saying, when you're watching, you're picturing yourself in a situation like that, what those people were going through, and the odds against them. And it was a real thing. It really happened. And when you think of the guys that sacrificed and women that sacrificed their lives and what it meant in that scheme of things, it's really something. But to come here and go and see it, it's almost like a shock to you when you just look at the building and the size, and it's such a small place. That's
a great point, because the story, especially even when you go to a movie theater, it feels larger than life. And then it's almost like it's miniaturized when you're actually face to face with it. Oh my God, this isn't as imposing as, you think it is because of the story and the legends associated with it.
Yeah, in fact, the first time I went there, I thought that they were going to take me into some other area after. It was like, this is
it?
The place you go just for the beginning, and now you go to the actual place.
Yeah.
I didn't realize it was actually in the Alamo.
It's so true. All right, let's get to some hockey. Lots of texts already are coming in. The Wild lose to the Jets last night 4-1. Are you prepared to just write this one off as really, really good goaltending, or is there more to it than that? Given that, again, this is one of the teams that the Wild are kind of chasing, and you're trying to measure yourself against the best teams. And I think Russo had the note that if you go back to basically this year and last season, the Wild are 0-12-2 against the Jets, Stars, and Colorado, three of the best teams in the Central the past 13 months. Is that concerning?
That's concerning. It has to be concerning because you got to break the bubble here sometime to give you confidence and also to, reassure you that you have what it takes to beat the team. But at the same time, when you come out and put the kind of effort that they did, and I obviously couldn't have seen it. I had a client dinner last night, but I came back and was reading about it and saw some of the highlights. I have to say that they have to take comfort in the fact that they got the opportunities. At the same time, they got to be concerned that they don't score any opportunities, because you got to do that. You can look at it two ways. You can look at it, we can beat these guys if we score, but then the other ways, we haven't been able to score. We got to find a way to do that because it's happening too often against these kind of teams. And in the playoffs, and in all likelihood, those games are going to be games that the team with first team to 3 goals is going to win the game. So you got to find a way to get 3 goals in the game against Winnipeg and Dallas and,
no question,
and Colorado. So these are things that even when you're having a good year, you have to be concerned about that. You have to find a way to get it done, because there's going to come a time when you have to do it if you want to keep on playing.
The Kaprizov injury obviously ends up not being as ominous as it certainly looked at the moment. And then even then that Sunday, they're going, we're reevaluating, which I think a lot of people got a little bit scared then. So I had a couple texts from people going, well, part of the problem when it comes to Kaprizov is we got to get a goon. We got to get somebody who's going to protect him. When he's gotten hurt, it seems like it's been with players who really don't matter, and that's the only way to make the point. Now, that's the way the league ran, 20 years ago, 30 years ago? I'm not sure.
Not even that, even less.
Even less.
Maybe 10, 15, but as you said, it doesn't now.
It does. That's what I was going to ask. It doesn't run that way now. Should it? Or do you say, no, you can't? That's just not the way things work these days. Do you have concern, I guess, about him and about the way he's getting hurt?
No, not at all, because he hasn't been hurt that much. And the once that he got hurt a lot because of how he plays. Mm-hmm. You take the one that when he really hurt his groin badly. He's got such a wide base and low when he's handling the puck, so somebody's on his back and he finally loses balance as it goes down. All the weight is on that area that he injured. You have to remember, first and foremost, he's got the puck all the time. So when you got the puck that much, you're going to get hit. You're going to have contact when you're carrying the puck a lot, because people want that puck. And if they really think that there's somebody sitting on the bench that they're going to be concerned about, especially when you get in the playoffs, you think they can have 4 goons sitting on the bench. But if Kaprizov's got the puck and they have to win the game, they're going to hit Kaprizov. And that part of the game, happily, has been taken out for the most part. The only time you ever see now a reaction, a goon-type reaction, is the thing that we hate so much, is after a good hard check, somebody goes out, and like Tom Wilson did for Capitals a few games back, and it was to McBain, when McBain collided with Ovechkin. I saw that play 10 times. McBain didn't try and hurt his leg, and there was more Ovechkin going towards him to cause the injury. So what happens... nothing happened that shift. Wilson goes out later and gets in a fight with McBain, which was needless, stupid, and all it did was put Wilson back in the box when, Washington has to win the game, and he's one of their better players. He should have stayed in the ice. But you're not having as much of that, well, not even close to there used to be in the game. And right now, the only time that they get that, and the NHL could get that out of the game, if they give the guy a game misconduct right away for doing that kind of thing. Put him out of the game, then that would eliminate that as well.
You know, it's been a year since Hines was signed after the Wild Guerin made the change last year. And so a lot has been written, you know, regarding that 1 year anniversary. And one of the things I want to talk about with you is sort of the way I sense the identity of this team has changed under Hines. We used the comparison of, you know, when the Wolves broke out last year, there was really essentially one reason. They became a superb defensive team. So no matter what they did offensively, on a given night, their defense was going to be fundamentally sound and solid and keep them in games, give them a chance. And to me, that's the step, notwithstanding the difficulty against better teams that they still have to overcome, the Wild has taken, where at the base, they know they're going to be between goaltending and the defense in front of them. That's become kind of their calling card, their identity, that becomes your trademark and can make everything else easier. What do you think?
I think you're exactly right. And I don't care if it's hockey or basketball, baseball, football. You have to be able to play defense to win. And in hockey, as I said on the show many times, you take care of your own zone first, and then that takes care of everything else. And the Wild, when they were 2 years ago, when they had over 100 points with Dean, 109 or whatever it was, tremendous defensively. Goaltending was superb. Gustafsson first and second in different categories and save percentage and goals against. Then they lost their way a little bit early on, and Hines came in and he started bringing them back to that. And I don't see a lot of difference from now from what they did when they got 109 points. They're playing a team, collective defensive game, narrow gaps, no room, taking the body, supporting one another, just the regular things you do. But they're doing it now much more consistently than they did last year when they started. And they're doing it in a way that is better, I think, than they did last year because they're taking far less penalties. They're not getting penalized as much.
That's true.
When Foligno could have like 2 minor penalties 20 games in the year, that's amazing. So they're collectively playing a very strong defensive game, which gives them the opportunity to win to start. Then you get the goaltending on top of that has been very, very good compared to last year. And so they got a ways, they're starting. And, they started off when they're healthy. They had 2 lines really going, scoring a lot of goals, and Kaprizov leading the league in scoring. That's certainly a recipe to win and win often, and that's what they were doing. But as is going to happen throughout the year for everybody, you're going to get injuries, and they're starting into a little injury streak right now that hurts a bit because Zuccarello, was such a big part of it. And Kaprizov, fortunately, only missed the 1 game, and hopefully, it's not something that he can re-injure or might linger. But, they got to stay healthy because it really means a difference if you have to shake up the top 2 lines. And I'm surprised Eriksson X is playing so well, but he's not as productive as he was last year. So I expect him to break out, and that'll be another big asset for him. Yeah,
that's a great point. Some texts have come in for Luigi with us till the top of the hour, including a Gopher question. A texter wants to know what you think of the Gopher freshman class.
I think they're very good. I know talking to Bob Mosko a bit, he's ecstatic about him. He's very pleased with what he got. And I think that he feels that way because they're also in a position to be more physical and play stronger because they're more mature than the freshman class we've had there a long time when they come right out of high school and right into the lineup. So they're a good team. They lost a couple games. Bemidji played them very well the last time, even though they did Bemidji. The first one that they lost in Vegas, that they should have easily won that. They hit over 40 shots, but Bob is really pleased with his team, and he's. I'd have to say, I don't remember him being as excited about the freshman coming in as he's been this year. I know he probably felt that, and you feel that way after when you see how some of them performed, and when you look at a guy like Logan Cooley that he had for a while there coming in, and that freshman class is going to be tough to ever beat that one.
You know, it's interesting. I heard Motzko. I don't know if this was a Grimm interview, Mike Grimm, but I heard him kind of do a state of his team. And he was very honest, and he said, look, I mean, there's a lot of games we're winning on talent, but he said, really, he pointed, I don't remember which game it was, he said, but there was one, maybe even a couple of periods in a single game, where he said, this was the game where I felt like we played with the kind of edge that we need to play with. And the suggestion seemed to be that he wants to see more of that he hasn't seen as much of that edge as he would like to see. Can you speak to that at all?
Yeah, I can, because I said, in my discussions with him too, I said, I'd like to see them check a little more, a little harder, because, and he feels that way too. And being, you have a number of young guys there, and being able to skate and handle the puck so much, sometimes guys forget that there's other parts of the game. And I know, not so much now, he wants them to start doing it more, but he wants them to be ready to play in the playoffs with a physical edge. And I really do know and believe that he thinks he's got a ways to go to get there, but he thinks they can get there. And that is, if you ask me what's missing the most in that team, that's what I would say is missing the most.
Another text, this is from 651. Can you ask Louis about Ogren? Is he a bust, or are the Wild giving up on him, or is he just is he still part of the future?
Oh, he's definitely part of the future. I don't think that you give up on a kid that age, that young, with the skill that he's got. You got to learn. It's hard to understand, but the game is really different in Europe than it is here. And one, because of the size of the rinks, and it's harder to find contact and get in contact. And secondly, that the importance that they put on, moving the puck more, not shooting all the time, and having better. They want better shots, better angles, and don't just throw the puck away as much. He's got a learning experience, and it's good that he gets the opportunity to go down there in the minors and learn. I've said this on the show before, and years ago, the best general manager in hockey maybe ever was Sammy Pollock for the Montreal Canadiens. And we weren't able to draft at 18, then we had to draft at 20. And there was a couple of kids that I had that I was concerned about that we had drafted. And I remember asking him, I said, Sammy, tell me this. What's your philosophy about when do you think you've seen enough of a guy before and then you want to move him? He said, Lou, I usually wait till they're 23. He says, if I haven't seen what I want to see by 23, then I'll move them. But I usually give them at least that time, because guys develop at a different age, and I have seen a number of kids develop, after they've been here a couple of years. So Ogren's a ways away from 23 yet, so I say don't give up on him.
612 guy asks about the power play. Which is more important, coaching and setting up plays, or individual creativity? Why are the Wild struggling?
Well, when you ask that question that way, you're answering it a bit yourself, because you're saying individual creativity. Well, if only one individual's got the creativity, you got 5 guys out there, might all get nullified because the other 4 don't know how to react with them or make the same play. So you have to say it's really a balance. You have to have the coaching philosophy. For one, I think that you're going to find a lot of different things there that people don't really focus on. It's where you're taking a shot from, how fast you're taking a shot, how much you move the puck before you shoot. Little things like that bother me, for instance. Say a guy on the left boards gets the puck and he skates all the way out to the point, and the point man there, he gives him the puck, and then the point man goes with the puck back to that other place. The first and foremost thing you should remember, not only in the power play but all the time, is you can't skate as fast as the puck. So if you're going to take the puck someplace and drop it off, you might as well pass it faster and start the play rather than killing 3-5 seconds just to do one thing you could have done in a half a second. Secondly, if you got a good shooter on the side, a good shooter means he's not only going to shoot it fast and hard, he's going to be accurate. Because when you shoot the puck from the side, either of the dots on their circles on the left or right, if you miss the net, that puck's coming out of the zone. So you got to have somebody that's going to hit the net at least with the shot, so you don't lose 20 seconds to go back and get the puck. Third, you got to have somebody that's good, not only physical, but good with his hands to get in front of the goaltender, take his eyes away, and then if pucks are coming, to be able to deflect them. I mean, there's all different parts in it. Then you got to have somebody in the bumper position that knows enough that, one, he can deflect passes and shots. Secondly, he can pass it off quickly, or third, get it away quickly. So there's all parts of it. Now, how does that come to work? You got to have coaching to coach that. The coaches have got to get these guys doing those little things. So it's a combination of both to make it successful.
Question off the beaten track here. A listener wanting to know whether it's worth taking the trip to the Hockey Hall of Fame. How long does it take to do the tour, etc.?
Well, I'm going to say something that's very controversial. It's worth it to see the thing. I just wish that they did a better job maintaining it.
Interesting.
There's a lot of things in there that are worthwhile to see, but I think that they could do a much better job of maintaining the whole place itself. And I've sat for years on the Foundation Board USA Hockey, and I kept, harping at that, and it just never got done the way. Because if they're talking about the one in Evelyn, now if you went to the Hockey Hall of Fame in Canada, it's phenomenal. It's phenomenal. The one in Canada is very worthwhile to go and see. It'll take you, if you want to do it properly, it'll take you a couple hours, and it took a lot of time and money. It used to be in a different place, and I was in the NHL when the league decided to move it and get a better place and put a lot of money into it. And they got an old building right downtown Toronto, right by the Royal York Hotel. And if you're into hockey and you want to see, I think, a real classic Hockey Hall of Fame, go to the one in Toronto and you'll never regret it.
So the one you're troubled by regarding upkeep, maintenance is in Evelyn.
Yeah.
So where's that? So is that a money issue? Is that a leadership issue? What do you think?
I think it's leadership, and you know what else it is? It hasn't been advertised or brought in front of the public enough to get enough people to come up there. Yeah. And when you say leadership, it also means in a way that you got to drive people interest in that to get people there, because you can't support it if you don't have any money. That's what happened to the original Hockey Hall of Fame. Even though, you think Toronto and you think Hockey Hall of Fame, we weren't getting enough visitors there to support it, to make it worthwhile.
Even Toronto?
So the NHL had to pour a lot of money into it. Right. But it became worthwhile because it became such a classic place to see.
Oh, that's interesting to me. You'd like to think somebody would take the leadership position there, and I don't know. I mean, is part of the problem that people perceive Evelyn is too remote, and that's working against it?
Yeah, but if you sell it the right way, everyone might be a little remote. But what a great place to go in the summers and stuff like that.
Sure.
There's so much to do around the lake area in that. But if I told you, and I hope I'm wrong, but I know I'm not wrong, the attendance in a year might be 7,500 people. We could get that one week down at the Mall of America. Yeah, I mean, it's not as much as you think. I hope that I'm way wrong. I don't believe I am. I've been harping on it for so long, and it's they built a beautiful building. It's in to me, it's like the hotbed, the birth of hockey in Minnesota, maybe in the U.S. And it's easy to get to, and especially in the summer, it's so wonderful around there. So many lakes and things to do around there. If I was younger and I had my children and they were interested in hockey, I would take a day to go up there and take them to show them around there. Yeah. I think it's terrific, and they got so many nice items and stuff like that. But
No. I think he should be drafted.
I think you got to. Anytime you want something worthwhile, you got to work at it. Nothing happens by accident or without a lot of work.
Would you be willing to lead the way if they announced they were moving it to I don't know, Florida or something?
No,
Throw the game.
I'll throw the game down there. No, I think Minnesota's the perfect place for it. One of the things I think that they should do, Dan, and we've talked about and discussed it, is have a traveling Hall of Fame.
Great point.
So you take some of the artifacts that you have up there and just move them around the country.
Yes.
One time you're in Boston, then you're either at the XL or hockey or the Mega Mall. I mean,
you need to get on this
around the country.
Louis,
Pardon me?
you need to get on this. I mean, somebody needs to galvanize this whole thing. Who better than you?
I've been trying to galvanize for 20 years. That's I've been talking about this. Never got done.
Yeah, that's
I'm
unfortunate.
certainly not going to take time to do it. I got my own job to do.
Yeah, you do. You're a busy
I got to be in the radio with you too.
Yeah, you got to be on the radio. You got to go.
But I really think that there's ways. It really takes an effort to do, but I know it could be extremely successful because they've got a wonderful number of different items that people would like to see, and you know what happens if you do something like that and you start, say, a traveling Hall of Fame. You create interest all over the country that people then eventually would want to go to Evelyn and see the rest of the stuff.
Sure.
You start creating interest in pockets of the country that never know or talk about it. And I think that that's what's needed badly because they put all this money and all this work in creating a wonderful building when they started out. It was a gorgeous building. They got a great out front, a nice statue or, glove and a hockey stick, a wonderful piece of art, sculpture. And they just have to... They got to get some people to work on this and get this thing done because it'd be worthwhile if they did.
Yeah, it's a great subject, and maybe we'll explore it more often here a couple times because you'd like to see somebody, like you say, aggressively get behind it a little bit because this is history. I mean, what's more important than the history of the sport, right? I mean, it's so
exactly
rich.
Right, and we're fortunate enough to have it in Minnesota.
Exactly. Yeah, that doesn't make any sense. Good subject. We'll explore that. Remind me to not forget it and drop it. We'll get back to that in coming weeks. A happy Thanksgiving to you and yours, my friend. And we'll chat next week. Thanks, Louis.
Okay. Thanks. Nice talking to you.
Awesome work from Luigi. Brought to you by our good friends at Kemp's. Guardsy is back in the house. He had an excused absence earlier. We've got Kyle Potter. Speaking of Thanksgiving, we'll talk Thanksgiving travel with him. That's going to be about 5:30 from Thrifty Traveler. And a mini Top 5 at 5 here is, I think, Guardsy's prepared to be a part of. I'm sure we'll get a little bit on the Wild last night, a little bit on the Wolves tonight, and a little bit on your Minnesota Vikings to a mini Top 5.
Wild, Wolves, Vikings. You nailed it. That's the list. By the way, what happens first? The Traveling Hall of Fame or the Ring of Honor for Glenn Mason's players at the University of Minnesota?
Good question.